Woodlands were moving here on site, so we're going to be sharing the site. So it was trying to think of creative ways that we could have inclusion and an opportunity to work together for the two schools that weren't always seen as academic.
Working with colleagues from a mainstream school who bring all that they understand and know and can do to our work just adds a completely other dimension. And it just affects your thinking, really, and it's good.
Toys from the Past offered Little Stanmore and Woodland Special School the opportunity to plan their history curricula together. And it was an unusual request from a pupil at Little Stanmore which led to the Shakespeare project.
I wrote a letter asking if we could do Romeo and Juliet.
The workshop started through one of the children in my class writing a letter asking us to do extracurricular drama workshops after studying Romeo and Juliet in literacy. And I shared this with John at Woodlands, and we thought of how we could do it together.
It was a fairly impassioned letter about wanting to do more Shakespeare. And then I started to think about using this as a kind of catalyst, if you like, for doing some work with the staff and the children at Little Stanmore. I'd heard of Keith Park and his work. I made contact with Keith, and it took a life of its own from there, really. What do you think about the outline of the project?
I was asked to include a small group of children with very, very complex needs into a larger group activity. I hit upon the idea of using a text and just breaking it down and using it in call and response. One of the basic concepts around which these workshops are done is the circle. It's very comforting and reassuring for workshop participants because, to begin with, no one has to stand out. There's the comfort in anonymity. And as confidence gradually increases, people can be invited to go into the middle and play a part in directing an episode, if they wish to do so.
We can try and sign as well, okay? Talk of peace! Talk of peace! I hate the word! I hate the word! And I hate hell!
What I've found is that more and more people want to go in to the middle and direct, as it were. Because the workshop itself is episodic, it's very easily learnable. Peers can help each other learn. I think enjoyment of stories, poetry and drama is something that is irrespective of disability and can be enjoyed by anyone.
Is enjoyment enough in a lesson? Is it enough reason for having a lesson rather than not?
Obviously, children are not going to learn unless they do enjoy what they're doing, and it obviously enhances and supports the learning process. But one of our underlying principles in developing what we did was this whole notion of allowing the particular population that we work with access to those experiences as a right in terms of the balance of their curriculum, but also looking at the whole issue as a continuum of learning.
Oh yeah. My only love. My only love. Sprung from my only hate. Sprung from my only hate.
The rhythm acts as a framework for communication skills.
That I must love. That I must love. Yeah.
It was found to be very successful, and we've just extended it and developed it ever since then. It's simply a matter of people feeling confident enough to go with it.
Excellent. Do you think this might be a good time to introduce the resonance board?
There's also something called a residence board, which is also a way of communicating. They lie down on the board, and when you bang it, they will be able to feel the vibrations.
A resonance board was originally developed for encouraging blind babies with multiple disabilities to move, because when the body moves on the board, the movement produces a resonance.
You want Sahan to come on? Okay, Ruksha is asking if Sahan can come on.
For a group such as this afternoon's, to have a resonance board in the middle enables the children with very complex learning needs to have some kind of vibrotactile stimulus. But it also provides an important communication aim because it acts as a joint visual attention. It focuses everyone's attention into the middle.
Use the board as you need to use it later.
So the resonance board performs a communicative function too.
Part 4. Tybalt and Mercutio have a fight. Thou art a villain! Thou art a villain! Villain am I none!
It's difficult for me to be a recorder of people's progress because trying to keep the whole thing going. But one of the children at one point went into the middle of the circle and stood on the resonance board, and his whole body posture spoke as if he was saying, "This is me, look at me." Now this, in technical terms, is called declaring of self, which is a very early basic communication skill, which is extremely hard to teach in a formal situation, but in storytelling and drama and poetry, it's a situation that arises naturally.
Give it some welly, folks. Oh, Elohim! Oh, Elohim! Methinks I see thee.
To communicate, we mostly use sign language, or the Big Mac. The Big Mac is a machine that records speech. It's called a Big Mac because it looks a bit like a burger. It was designed like that so the children could smack the top and it wouldn't be difficult.
A voice output communication aid is a communication device that contains one or more pre-recorded messages. Participants who are switch users have the opportunity to initiate, maintain and close communication exchanges. Now, for a child with severe learning disabilities, these early communication skills are extremely important, but also ones that are extremely difficult to teach in a more so-called formal session because they don't relate to asking and answering questions.
It seemed to me there were also elements very much of social inclusion going on there, and I wondered how you think that the sort of work he was doing is about the behaviour of youngsters and how they perceive themselves and self-esteem and so on and so forth.
It started off in an academic way, if you like, for a reason, because I felt that if I approached a mainstream school with an academically based project, i.e. Romeo and Juliet and Shakespeare, that again we would have a commonality of language and they would have a view of what it was we were going to do. It also relates very much to their curriculum and their experiences as well. What happened as the sessions developed, though, was the relationships that came, if you like, as a consequence of that academic learning framework became very powerful, and those relationships affected everybody's behaviour. Everybody's behaviour in that room changed.
How, chop logic? How, chop logic? Proud and I thank you. Proud and I thank you. Proud me no prouds. Proud.
The reason I have done workshops on Romeo and Juliet is because I feel that they have an intrinsic value of themselves.
Speak not, reply not.
But what teachers can do from mainstream schools and special schools is use the Romeo and Juliet workshop to fulfil their various objectives in English and drama and PSHE.
Romeo and Juliet.
So it is a very rich area for fulfilling national curriculum objectives.
Montague. Capulet.
But you needn't do Shakespeare, of course. You can use it with Benjamin Zephaniah or T.S. Eliot or Spike Milligan, anyone.
Talk of peace.
It fits in fully with the literacy curriculum in that we actually study Shakespeare in Year 5, in Year 6 and again in Year 7. And it's a different way of interpreting a piece of work.
And thee. Coward. Gabane. Puckdan.
There were spin-offs to that in our PSHE lessons. There were lots of issues arose over how do children at Woodlands learn? How do they communicate? So one of the teachers at the school let us have access to a week's lessons plans, and we shared them with the class, and we spoke about how they could plan for children without speech or communication. We also spoke about disability. We spoke about human rights. So there were lots of spin-offs from the literacy that fitted in with the curriculum perfectly.
Were there any very unexpected consequences for individuals or for colleagues or within the work you've been doing recently?
Yeah, a young child from our school, one of the children in Jill's lesson, in fact, Ruksha, going in a taxi to Little Stanmore School. And once she knew she was going to Little Stanmore School, she recited a verse from Shakespeare in the back of the taxi, and the teacher was stunned. And
the taxi driver was stunned.
Yeah. and she had the signing to go with it. She was sitting there calling him a villain. It's just fantastic feedback.
So you're looking at a sort of dynamic process which will affect everybody, including actually communication between parents, teachers, home and school, and so on and so forth, if it gets moving.
Absolutely. It's a journey, and it's going to be a long journey, but I think the kind of curriculum that we're devising, the kind of access, the kind of differentiation, and the principles that are underpinning the drive for our curriculum development should support everybody along that journey.
Have there been any particular difficult points or issues that you've had to deal with along the way?
In a given school day and in a given period of time, it is difficult. Our staff meetings have changed as a consequence of this work, because they are now very much conversations more so about learning, if you like, and specifically learning around this curriculum model. So out of every difficulty, or most difficulties, there does come a benefit, but I wouldn't be telling the truth if I didn't say there were times when I just couldn't see my way forward in terms of the development that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think also with the whole sort of communication being fed now into the curriculum, and I'm sure that's just only going to keep developing, the evaluation is going to presumably completely change, and the people involved in the evaluation process will probably change, and all of that will become very different, and that again, knock-on effect to the planning. So it's just a revolving process.
The DFES has recently published a package of materials on learning in the primary school and the examples of practice drawn from around the country. And they've chosen to include the Romeo and Juliet workshop from New Woodland School and Little Stanmore School to demonstrate that pupils with and without learning disabilities can learn together. And inclusion need not necessarily mean locational inclusion or social inclusion, but actually academic inclusion.
You like this discussion? You like this?
Children come into this school in the morning and they'll see me and they'll do an insult, a Shakespearean insult sign to me, because that's their physical demonstration of memory that they've been included. And what more could you ask for, really?
Everybody would like to grab hold of...
Before I went to Woodlands, I felt nervous and scared. Nervous because I didn't know how to interact with children with disabilities, and scared because I didn't know how to react with them.
The communication was hard, but then gradually got easier. I felt scared at first, but then I was normal.
The Romeo and Juliet we done was called Call and Response. The teacher was funny and kind.
I did have a favourite. His name is Paddy.
I enjoyed Romeo and Juliet. I'm glad that I wrote the letter because we get to meet the Woodland School children and the teachers.
Everybody help me! Everybody help me! Everyone a nice job!